I used to believe that if a home stayed quiet long enough, nothing bad could happen inside it. Our mornings were predictable. Coffee brewed at the same time every day. Shoes lined up near the door. My son moving through the house with the careful steps of someone who didn't want to disturb the peace. I told myself this was what stability looked like. Routine, familiarity, silence that didn't ask questions. My marriage had settled into something comfortable, too comfortable, maybe. We spoke about schedules, bills, groceries. We laughed when it was expected. We slept in the same bed but dreamed separately. I noticed the distance, of course, but I explained it away the way people always do. Work stress, age, time, love doesn't disappear, I thought. It just changes shape. My son, though, he watched everything. He had always been observant, the kind of child who noticed when moods shifted before voices did. He lingered in doorways longer than necessary. Asked questions that felt too sharp for his age. Sometimes I caught him studying my face, as if he were trying to solve a problem I didn't know existed. I should have paid attention to that. There were signs, small ones, easy to ignore if you didn't want your world disturbed. A phone turned face down on the table. Late evenings explained with vague excuses. A smile that arrived late and left early. I told myself trust meant not looking too closely. At night, when the house settled, I would lie awake listening to the quiet. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt like something holding its breath. My son started spending more time in common spaces, pretending to read or scroll, always nearby. Once, I noticed him staring at a glowing screen reflected in the window, his jaw tight, his shoulders tense. When I asked if something was wrong, he shrugged. Just tired, he said. Children lie badly when they're trying to protect someone. I remember thinking how fast he was growing up. How quickly innocence seems to fade without asking permission. I didn't realize then that it wasn't time doing that to him, it was truth. That afternoon, everything still looked normal. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. The house smelled like detergent and leftover coffee. If someone had told me this was the last calm moment before everything unraveled, I would have laughed. I was so sure of my life. So sure of my family. So sure that love, once built, couldn't crack without warning. I didn't know my son had already seen the cracks. I didn't know he had been carrying a weight that wasn't his to hold. And I didn't know that by the end of the day, the quiet I trusted so much would be gone forever. Because sometimes, the people who change our lives the most, are the ones we never expect to speak up at all. It happened without drama. No shouting, no slammed doors, just a moment so quiet it felt unreal. My son stood in the kitchen, his backpack still hanging from one shoulder. He didn't move to put it down. He didn't look at me at first. His eyes stayed fixed on the counter, on a spot that didn't matter. I remember thinking he looked older somehow, as if the weight he carried had bent time around him. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I nodded, distracted, already half somewhere else. I didn't know that the question he was about to ask wasn't really a question at all. He took a breath, then another. "Do you trust him?" The words landed wrong, heavy, out of place. I felt a small, sharp discomfort in my chest, the kind you ignore because acknowledging it would mean changing direction. "Of course I do," I said too quickly. "Why would you ask that?" He finally looked at me then. His expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was tired. "I didn't mean to see anything," he said. "I wasn't trying to spy." My mouth went dry. I wanted to interrupt him, to stop whatever this was before it became real. But he kept going, his voice steady in a way that scared me. "The messages," he said quietly. "The way he leaves the room to answer calls. The nights he comes home smelling like someone else's perfume." He swallowed. "I thought maybe you already knew." Each sentence felt like something tearing loose inside me. I shook my head, not in denial exactly, but in disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. Not through my child. He reached into his backpack and hesitated, his hand trembling. Then he stopped himself. "I don't want to show you," he said. I couldn't keep pretending. That was when it hit me, how long he had been holding this alone. How many times he must have argued with himself. How many nights he had chosen silence over comfort. Why didn't you say anything sooner? I asked, my voice barely steady. His eyes filled, but he didn't cry. Because he's still my parent, he said. And you're still my family. Something inside me broke at that. My child wasn't choosing sides, he was choosing truth. And in doing so, he had stepped into a role no child should ever have to take. I felt anger then, sharp and sudden. Not at my son, never at him, but at the betrayal that had forced this moment. At the lies that had made my child the messenger. The kitchen felt smaller, the walls too close. The silence I had trusted for so long suddenly felt like an accomplice. That was the moment I knew nothing would be the same again. Because when a child becomes the one who reveals the truth, the damage has already gone far beyond betrayal. And the hardest part wasn't what my son told me. It was realizing he had loved us enough to risk breaking us. The confrontation didn't happen right away. I needed time to breathe, to think, to pretend for just a few more hours that I wasn't standing on the edge of something irreversible. My son retreated to his room, the door closing softly behind him, as if even that sound might shatter what little was left of us. When evening came, the house filled with a familiar presence that suddenly felt foreign. There was a moment, just a moment, where I almost said nothing. Where I considered carrying the truth quietly, sparing everyone the damage it would cause. That was the old instinct speaking. The one that believed silence was safer than honesty. But I had already learned that lesson too late. I asked him to sit down. My voice surprised me, steady, controlled, almost cold. He smiled, the same casual smile I had seen 100 times before. It didn't reach his eyes. Is there something you want to tell me? I asked. The pause that followed felt endless. His gaze flickered toward the hallway, toward our son's room, then back to me. In that second, I knew. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. I said her name, not loudly, not accusingly, just enough. Everything collapsed. The excuses came first. Misunderstandings, stress, nothing serious. Then frustration, when I didn't soften. Then silence, thick and heavy, like a wall slamming down between us. I realized how practiced he was at hiding. How long this had been happening right under our roof. What about him? I asked quietly. What about what you've done to our son? That was the question that finally broke through. He buried his face in his hands. I watched a stranger unravel in front of me, someone who shared my bed, my home, my life. He admitted it then, not all at once, piece by piece, enough to confirm what my heart already knew. From the hallway, I felt my son's presence before I saw him. He stood there, frozen, eyes wide, guilt written across his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to listen. I wanted to scream that none of this was his fault. Instead, I opened my arms and he came to me, pressing his face into my shoulder like he used to when he was younger. I held him tightly, feeling how thin the line was between childhood and something harder. That night, loyalty tore us apart. One of us had chosen desire over family. One of us had chosen truth over comfort. And my son was caught in the middle, carrying consequences he didn't create. Later, alone in the dark, I stared at the ceiling and understood something I had never faced before. Infidelity doesn't just betray a partner, it rewrites the entire family dynamic. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It fractures. And once it does, every relationship feels the cracks. By morning, nothing was resolved. But everything was exposed. And sometimes, that's the most painful kind of beginning. Morning arrived quietly, as if the house didn't know it had been split open the night before. Sunlight crept through the curtains, landing on the empty side of the bed. I lay there longer than usual, listening. No footsteps. No familiar sounds. Just space where certainty used to live. The conversation we never finished hung in the air like unfinished business. Some decisions don't happen in a single night, they unfold slowly, painfully, through what is no longer said. By the time my son came into the kitchen, dressed and silent, we both understood that something permanent had shifted. He sat across from me, staring into his untouched breakfast. I didn't ruin anything, did I? He asked. The question cut deeper than any confession. I reached for his hand, holding it firmly, grounding us both. No. I said. You didn't ruin us. You told the truth. There's a difference. He nodded, but I could see the doubt linger. Children shouldn't have to learn that honesty can hurt people they love. Yet here he was, forced into that lesson by someone else's choices. The separation didn't happen dramatically. No shouting matches. No public scenes. Just a slow unraveling of shared spaces and shared habits. A suitcase by the door. A toothbrush left behind. The kind of details that say more than arguments ever could. What stayed with me most wasn't the betrayal, it was the role my son had been pushed into. He had become a witness to adult failure, a keeper of secrets he never asked for. And still, he had chosen integrity. Our relationship changed after that. Not for the worse, but forever. He was more guarded, more aware. Childhood slipped further away, replaced by a quiet strength I wished he hadn't needed to develop so soon. One evening, weeks later, he sat beside me on the couch. Would you rather I hadn't said anything? He asked. I thought about the life I almost continued living, the lies, the distance, the slow erosion of trust. I thought about silence, and what it costs. No, I said, because living in a lie would have hurt us longer. He leaned his head against my shoulder, and in that moment, I understood the truth of it all. He was my son, but that day, he became the reason I faced reality. The reason I chose honesty over illusion. The reason our family, broken as it was, stopped pretending. Infidelity ended a marriage, but courage reshaped a bond. Some moments don't destroy us. They redefine us. And the one who changed everything was the child who refused to let love survive on lies.